Wow, so there could be, yeah, some really nice scoring bulls out there. Man, that's fantastic.
Everybody truly does have the same equal opportunity at that tag. For those who have heard an elk bugle in the woods, it's a pretty phenomenal experience.
Is this hunt for residents only, or will it be allowed for non-residents? Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Got an exciting one for you today. If you're an elk hunter and like hunting bugling elk, this is a podcast for you. I sit down today with Aaron Hildreth, who is a biologist for the Department of Conservation in Missouri, and we talk about Missouri's first elk season. We talk about the details behind it, how it came to be, again, the details on what the hunt is going to look like for this year. So I want to tell Aaron thank you. He was an awesome guest, shared a lot of great information with me and with us, so hopefully you guys take advantage of that information. Before we get into that podcast, though, I want to send a shout out to our sponsor, Vortex Optics. The guys over at Vortex are amazing. Right now is an awesome time of the year because we're starting to see some horn growth on these animals. Got a chance to get out and look at some of the herds around town here, and was looking at just a small herd, but even a ways away I was able to tell that they were starting to have a little bit of horn growth on top of their head, which gets me excited. So I want to thank Vortex Optics, one, for giving me the opportunity to look as far as I was looking to see those animals and give me the clarity to see the antlers on their heads. But I want to thank them for their support. They sponsor everything that we do here at eHunter, and we're very grateful for them. So also, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it around. We're gonna have a lot of really cool podcasts coming out here in the near future. This is a great time for podcasting just because, like I said, draw results are coming out. We're starting to get a lot of good information coming into us. Got a lot of really good articles going up on the ehunter.com site, so go check that out as well. But please subscribe to the podcast, share it around with those that you feel that would enjoy the podcast, and let us know if there's any questions you guys have or things that we can do better. So without further ado, let's jump into the podcast with Aaron. All right, welcome back to the eHunter newscast. I'm pretty excited about this podcast. I've had a lot of comments come in about a new opportunity for hunting in Missouri, and when we released the article on it, I knew right away that I needed to get a podcast going on this topic, and got a great guest with us today. I've got Aaron from Missouri. He's a biologist in Missouri. Welcome to the call, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you taking the time. I know you guys that are biologists. I know you guys are always busy, let's be honest. So appreciate you taking the time to answer some of these questions that I have for you today. But before we get into that, would you mind doing a little introduction of yourself, exactly kind of what you do there in Missouri and things like that?
Yeah, so I've been with Missouri Department of Conservation for about 3.5 years now, as their elk biologist and one of our deer biologists, and so it's been a fun ride there. You handle pretty much everything or work with folks on everything from regulations to management of species, research projects, and so on. Prior to my time here, I spent some time out west in Idaho. I did my grad work at the University of Kentucky, actually on the very elk that were being reintroduced to Missouri and Virginia in 2012 and 2013. So it's a good full circle kind of thing.
Man, yeah, that is a good full circle. I spent a couple of years in Kentucky. Absolutely loved Kentucky, but being a Western guy, Western hunting, I had to come, back out west to do it. And that's cool that you spent some time out here in Idaho, and man, what great opportunities. So you kind of touched on it with Missouri, and a lot of people when they think of Missouri don't think of elk. I think a lot about deer. I think a lot about turkeys, things like that when I think about Missouri. And like I said, a lot of people don't really think about elk. And so kind of what I'd like to talk most about today is elk hunting in Missouri and the new opportunity that's presenting itself. Would you mind kind of introducing what's going on there, Aaron, and then we'll jump into some of these questions?
Yeah, so we'll jump back between 2011 and 2013, Missouri reintroduced about 108 elk into the state from Kentucky. And so, after that, we've basically been, slowly growing the herd, dealing with, that reintroduction process, as well as, other issues that just affect wildlife populations. Again, we've been slowly growing that population up to where we are today now, where, we estimate we have slightly over 200 elk. And that, that number for many may seem like a really small number. And as when we talk more about the number of permits, that'll also kind of explain why. But even though we have a small population, we've now kind of reached that point where we can allow very limited recreational harvest while still continuing to grow that population here in the state. It's worth, really pointing out how big of a conservation success story this is. There are other eastern states that have also reintroduced elk, whether that's Kentucky or Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Michigan from way back when. There are lots of stories about other eastern states reintroducing elk, and it really does take a very large army of folks to make those reintroductions successful. And there are lots and lots of partners, whether it's private landowners and the public, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. There's just a host of organizations that really help make these possible, and it's something that the citizens in those states should be very proud of.
I don't think a lot of people see the backstory to all of these. I did a podcast recently about a bighorn sheep transplant, and man, you think of the man hours that go into a transplant like this. It really is unreal, and I think a lot of those people don't get their due respect for the hard work that they put in, the time that they put in, and so I agree completely with you. So historically, obviously, Missouri hasn't been a huge elk state, and you kind of talked about that transplant from Kentucky. Has there been limitations in the past that have limited Missouri from having elk? Is it just because they haven't had the numbers, or is it habitat? Have there been limitations in the past and reasons why this hasn't happened before?
I guess I'll clarify. Are you talking about why we didn't reintroduce them sooner, or why we haven't hunted them prior to now?
Yeah, no, I'd say more, why haven't they introduced them sooner? Was there just not the herd to bring in, or just not the opportunity?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. One, I'll backtrack a little bit. When we think about elk historically in North America, and we'll focus, I guess, more specifically here in the U.S., prior to, settlement by, prior to colonization of the country, elk were pretty well found throughout the entire United States, minus some of the extreme northeast part of the country and probably most of the state of Florida. Elk were found throughout the country. And as, settlers moved west, we did a very unfortunate job of unregulated market hunting, and that really was hard on those populations and ultimately drove them to extinction in the case of the eastern elk subspecies, which is what would have been found throughout most of the eastern half of the U.S. That subspecies doesn't exist anymore. The Rocky Mountain subspecies, which is frequently used as the substitute, there are a lot of similarities. So it's not like it's a completely foreign species or subspecies, so to speak. But just because we are trying to move them around, the country doesn't look like it looked in the 1800s. We have much larger population centers around the country. We have the road networks that accompany that. We also have other competing interests. Row crop agriculture would be one. There are some folks who are very familiar with the damage that a deer can cause to a crop field.
Yeah.
Elk are a bigger animal with a much bigger belly, and so there are some hurdles as far as where you can reintroduce those animals. Then there's the funding side of it. There's also disease. We look at state agencies are tasked with managing the resources of those states that are held in public trust. Well, chronic wasting disease is a disease that many people have heard a lot about. Brucellosis and tuberculosis are two other ones. Those are three things that we really can't afford to move around when we move cervids. And so the process of actually, getting the funding, doing this, the study to figure out where you can actually safely and properly reintroduce them into, and then finding that source herd that is free of those diseases, even though they're still going to undergo, some kind of a disease testing or quarantine period. It's a really long process. And so it really isn't just as simple as, we want elk. Okay, let's have elk.
Mm-hmm. So does the habitat there in Missouri, is it a good habitat for elk? Is it something that they'll thrive in and continue to grow their numbers?
It is good habitat. And so that's, the original look into reintroducing elk in Missouri actually began in 1999, 2000. We did the initial feasibility study and identified kind of the Missouri Ozarks as probably the best location in the state when we thought about everything, whether it was obviously good habitat for elk, minimizing potential for conflicts. That was where it was settled on. That was tabled until we came to around 2010, 2011 when we started the reintroduction process. So yeah, it is really good habitat. There are just, known limitations, and the biggest hindrance to elk here in Missouri so far has been it's a really, really small parasite that looks about like a human hair, and it's called brainworm. Mm-hmm. Or meningeal worm is another name that people know it by. It's very common in whitetail deer. It's found most places where whitetail deer exist, and whitetail deer aren't really affected by it, but elk, moose are fairly significantly impacted by it. And here in Missouri, again, brainworm really is by far the leading cause of death for our herd. And so that's just another thing that slowed the process.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, so this herd that is in Missouri, they are Rocky Mountain elk, right?
That is correct. So with the elk, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what age class are they? I know a lot of people will be looking at, as we're opening up this new elk season that we'll talk about here in just a second. What's the age class of this herd?
From as young as they get to as old as they can be.
Wow.
So, we reintroduced animals, elk starting in 2011, and there are some, it's worth noting when reintroductions take place, for a variety of reasons, you don't reintroduce adult male elk when you move them around, or it's not very commonly done. One, you don't want to take prime age bulls from the place that's supplying them, because those are a highly valued thing for the hunters that hunt that state. Mm-hmm. Also, and probably more importantly, adult bulls are very aggressive during that quarantine period. And so they have the potential to hurt themselves and other animals. So you typically just reintroduce younger age males. So for Missouri, that meant that we took, at the time of release in Missouri, males were either 1 year old or 2 years old. So we started out with a very young age cohort in the males, but 2011 was 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. So those animals have had the opportunity to mature into prime age class bulls.
Wow, so there could be some really nice scoring bulls out there. That's fantastic. Let's jump into this new hunting season, which is this is the first elk season in Missouri, correct?
This is the first elk hunting season ever in the state of Missouri.
Wow. And what are the dates on that? When does it start?
So there are two portions to the season. The same permit is actually valid for both portions. You've got an archery season or portion that runs October 17th through the 25th, and then a firearm portion that runs December 12th through the 20th.
Okay. So out in the West, their rutting season usually is, a few weeks there in September. Is it the same out there, or is it a little bit later?
It's a little bit later here. So when we look at, the studies that we did during the reintroduction time frame, we could see the calving dates and just basically backtrack from when they were born. We know how long, their they're in womb and mom. And so we're able to pinpoint our peak conception or peak breeding or rutting dates are roughly the end of September through about the middle of October.
Oh wow! So that archery hunt actually may catch the end of the rutting season there then.
It will, and that's somewhat by design. So right now we have a goal of continuing to maximize population or herd growth, but we also recognize that for those who have heard an elk bugle in the woods, it's a pretty phenomenal experience. And so the opportunity, we know that hunters want that opportunity to interact with those elk during the time where they're screaming their heads off and bugling. So we wanted to put that archery season as close to that time frame as possible, but still make sure that we get the peak of our breeding done before hunters get out to the field.
Yeah. Well, that's a sound that I live for, is the bugle of an elk. And I know there's probably a lot of folks, or a lot of hunters in Missouri that may have not heard that in the wild and be chasing one of those animals with a bow in your hand. And man, the thought of giving them the opportunity to chase them with them bugling, like you said, interacting with them, have the opportunity to harvest them. Oh man, there is just there's just nothing better than that. Well, I have a ton of questions I want to ask you about this hunting season, and so let's first start off. We already talked about the season dates, but the next one I wanted to ask you about are the number of permits with a herd of 200-ish. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of permits. So can you kind of help me understand how many permits are there for each season? Kind of those numbers.
Yeah, so there for this first year, so for 2020, there are a total of 5 permits. So again, you're spot on with a population of around 200 right now. Harvest is purely recreational. The population can sustain a very limited bull or antlered elk only harvest. And we settled on 5 this year, taking a conservative approach. 4 of those permits are quote unquote general permits. One of them is specific for landowners from within an area around where we have the elk, recognizing that as we go through time, the only way that we will continue to have a successful elk herd here in the state is by having the support of private landowners. As we think about Missouri compared to Western states, we think about Western states in a very high percentage of public land. Missouri as a state is 93% privately owned.
Oh man!
So now one kind of a twist on that, where elk were reintroduced, is kind of the exact opposite for Missouri. It's about 80% publicly owned or accessible to the public.
Okay.
But we recognize that through time, as elk population grows, they're likely to spend a little bit more time on private land, and so we want to, we recognize that, and we want to make sure that we keep the support of the private landowners around where we have the elk.
Yeah, definitely. So geographically, where in Missouri will this hunt take place?
Southeast, south central Missouri. We kind of think of it. There'll be 4 very obscure towns, but more or less in Missouri, think of where we have the elk is between Van Buren, Winona, Eminence, and Ellington. If you draw that square, more or less elk are right in the middle of that square, and kind of the center where most elk were released is Peck Ranch Conservation Area, which is about a 24,000 acre area. That's a conservation area. So.
Okay. I am familiar with that area. I mentioned to you before we started recording that I'd spent some time in Kentucky, or maybe actually it was since we recorded, but that I spent some time in Kentucky and actually got very familiar with the surrounding states, so I know exactly where that's at. So, all right, my next question for you is, a lot of people are going to have asked this question. It's been the hottest question I've been asked since we posted that article. Is this hunt for residents only, or will it be allowed for non-residents?
So this hunt for now is for residents only.
Okay.
That could change at some point in time, but in Missouri, given that we have roughly 500,000 deer hunters in the state, realizing not all of them will be interested in pursuing elk, But we have a very strong hunting culture and hunting heritage, and so we know Missourians are going to be really interested in these permits. Given that it is so limited, we want to make sure that Missourians have that opportunity before non-residents. As the population grows through time, that could change, but ultimately, I don't know, and we'll seek the public's input on that. Something a lot of people also don't know probably about Missouri is one of our funding sources. So we are one of the few states that 1/8 of 1% of our state sales tax goes to the Missouri Department of Conservation. And so, in essence, all Missourians do truly contribute to conservation in this state. And it's a wonderful thing that allows us to do a lot of things. And so we really make sure that we put Missourians first when we think about what those opportunities look like, recognizing that non-residents are still important, but with this limited opportunity, we really want to put the preference first and foremost for Missourians.
Well, I'm going to get stoned for saying this from all my out-of-state hunters that like to travel from state to state, and I'll admit I do that as well, from state to state and hunt. But just to be honest, I appreciate that, honestly, because you're right. Missourians are the ones that truly deserve it at this time. Hopefully, at some point in time, it is open to non-residents. But I think that's cool. I think that's the right thing to do. Just have this open for residents only. And kind of a quick question, spinning off that, how's the draw system going to work, or the tags? How do residents get the tags? Is it a draw system, or is it a lottery, or how does that work?
So it is a pure random lottery or random drawing. So everyone applies. There's a $10 application fee for those who wish to put in for the general. There's actually no application fee for the landowners who wish to put in. But basically, all the names go in a hat, and names are drawn at random. That it really is that simple. We've avoided preference points. Preference points, and I'm probably going to get stoned for saying this. Having familiarity with the Western games that exist. Preference points do have a place. Arguably, at least in my opinion, they're most effective when you have a very realistic or reasonable draw odd. So if you have like a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 5 opportunity, preference points are great. They eliminate the lucky person that would have drawn every year and help the person out who, no matter how often they put in, they wouldn't draw it in 100 years, even if it was a 50-50 chance of drawing. That's when preference points are great. When you're talking a 1 in something really, really not good. So, even if we'll just say it's a 1 in 1,000 draw odds, I would venture a guess that a lot of people that put in for this are going to put in year after year after year.
Yeah.
There's not a single person out there that's going to live to be 1,000 years old.
Exactly.
So if you didn't put in year one, until everybody that puts in for year one is no longer putting in anymore, no one else can draw. And so I've asked, when people have asked this question, I've kind of thrown it back to them of, what would you like to ever see your kids or your grandchildren who may not even be born yet? Would you like to see them, or in the case of Missouri where you have to be 11 by the time of the hunt in order to apply, you have a 10-year-old who won't be 11 before the hunt starts. Do you ever want them to have an opportunity to hunt elk while you're still alive? And they all go, well, yeah. It's like, well, we have preference points. I can guarantee you they never will.
Exactly. It's a chase. You're always chasing. You did a very good job, by the way, of saying that, because I would have said that much worse than what you just said. But because seriously, that's the story of our lives out here in the West, is we're chasing points. I'm chasing points in so many states right now, and you're absolutely right. If you were to do that, those kids that are 10 right now would never have that opportunity to hunt. So at least this is it's a fair option for everybody. So no, great.
Yeah, we're not sugarcoating. We know the draw odds are not going to be spectacular, but everybody truly does have the same equal opportunity at that tag. And so we're trying to make it as fair as possible. And thinking about the Western hunts, even when we think about here, if we had a preference point system, if the number of permits changes, and like in the West, if you have a unit that whether it's gone through, severe fire that's changed the carrying capacity of that land, or, a severe winter that hurt the population, when the number of permits goes down, you get point creep, among other things. And it's a never ending battle. When you started putting in, it was going to take you 15 years to draw that bighorn sheep tag, and now it's 40. Mm-hmm. It's like, how did that work?
Yeah. Boy, you are speaking my language right now, because that's exactly what I'm going through. There's several tags that I should have drawn many years ago, and still haven't drawn them, and still am, 5, 10, 15 years out from drawing them. So, oh my goodness. Well, I could go on forever about preference points. So I appreciate what you guys are doing there. Like you said, it doesn't matter who you are. You have that opportunity. And if it's a $10 application fee, my goodness, I think most everybody's willing to donate $10 just to have the chance to be able to hunt that. So if real quick, if they do draw the tag, what's the fee for that?
So if you're lucky enough to draw the tag, it's a $50 permit fee. So we really didn't want, again, because Missourians support conservation so heavily, through that sales tax, we wanted to make this affordable for all Missourians. We wanted it to be, again, fair and equal permit distribution with the few that we have, and as affordable as possible.
That's cool. That is really cool. We're used to the numbers of several hundreds of dollars out here out west for a tag, and so, man, that's $50. That's amazing. So you kind of already answered this next question, but I do kind of want to dig into it a little bit more. You mentioned that there's an archery and a rifle season. In the rifle season, is there an option to use a muzzleloader or a shotgun during that time, or is it just a centerfire rifle?
Yeah, so we for those who are familiar with deer hunting in Missouri, the elk hunting methods are exactly the same. So during the archery portions, you can use, whether it's more modern or compound archery equipment, traditional archery equipment, crossbow, atlatl, all of those are legal methods of take during the archery portion. When we get to the firearm portion, it's actually all methods of take. So whether it is a rifle, a muzzleloader, your bow, all of those are now legal methods of take as is defined in our wildlife code. And so whatever you could use to hunt deer, you can use to hunt elk. We know that we have had some people ask the question of, so in Missouri, a 223 would actually be a legal whitetail deer round. Mm-hmm. That's not a great elk gun by any stretch of imagination. As many hunters can attest, the regulations that are often in place are incredibly confusing. Mm-hmm. There's lots of details associated with them, and while some of that is necessary, we want them to be as simple as possible. We're going to have the opportunity to talk to all of the individuals who draw these permits, and so we'll be able to have that conversation of, this isn't your 200-pound whitetail, this is an 800-pound elk. Choose your method of take appropriately.
Yeah.
And so we'll be able to address some of that. We already do that with deer and have very few issues. So we have no reason to believe that, especially with talking to the hunters, that hunters will make poor choices. No hunter wants to go out and wound an animal. So we think the hunters will be able to deal with that properly and not have to involve us burdening our wildlife regulations more than is necessary.
Oh, that's cool. I completely agree. And with the muzzleloaders, these muzzleloaders nowadays are pretty amazing. They're basically a rifle, and so that's cool that they would have that opportunity to to use that. So cool. All right, next question I have for you is after a person draws a tag, and I should actually ask this back when we were talking about the draw, but when a person draws a tag, from what I'm reading, there is a sit-out period once you've drawn that tag for a certain period of time before you can apply again. Can you kind of explain that and how long that is?
Yeah, so, when we were developing these regulations, we really did reach out to Missourians, and actually we reached out to anyone who, sought out the information. We wanted to collect input on how elk hunting would look like in Missouri from those who might be participating. And so one of the things that we asked was, given this is going to be a very limited opportunity, how would you like that side of it to look? We could go from one extreme to the other. We could have, it's a once in a lifetime permit, to you can apply every year, even if you drew the tag the previous year. And so, when we asked that question, there were certainly some that were on both of the extremes, but by and large, people went, yeah, if I drew a permit, I think it's only fair that there is a sit-out period of some time where I can't apply again, so that someone else has an opportunity to draw a tag before I possibly get really lucky and draw a second tag.
Yeah.
And so we kind of settled on 10 years. It was a long enough period, but it still gave people, they had something to look forward to after they drew that, hey, in 10 years, I can put my name back in the hat again.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how a lot of them are out here out west too. You have that sit out period. I know Utah's five years, and so that I agree. That's the fair thing to do. You've had that opportunity, kind of pull your name out of that hat for a little while, but like you said, you still have that hope and something to look forward to that you can put in again. And those lucky buggers, because I know there's going to be those lucky people out there that are going to draw it twice in their lifetime. Not me, but that would not be my luck. But
I'll join you on it. Won't be my, well, yeah, definitely won't be my luck.
You got luck like me, huh?
Yeah. I have very, very bad luck.
Yeah, I look at the draws that I put in for over the years and think, oh man, I should have drawn that several times and still haven't. So I think I'm the world's most unlucky person. So, all right, I have one more question about this specific hunt, and that is, a lot of people look at these bulls and what is going to be a legal bull to take. So I'm sure there are some regulations on that. What is a legal bull, and what these hunters need to be looking for in the field. So can you explain what a legal bull is in Missouri for this hunt?
Yeah, we kept it wonderfully simple. It is, any elk with at least one antler greater than 6 inches in length.
Oh, so it could be a spike.
Absolutely. And so the way that we looked at this, again, right now, this hunt is purely recreational. We're not yet to the time where we're going to be intensively managing, herd structure and the age of the animals that we have. This really is about providing a recreational opportunity. If a hunter is happy taking a spike, we're happy with that hunter being happy taking a spike. If that hunter wants to hold out for, whatever they define as that trophy or larger, older age animal, we're happy with them doing that as well. Both exist. With the small number of permits we have, there is no harm in allowing the take of any antlered animal. So allow the hunter to use their own discretion on what that animal is and whether they want to take it or not.
That's awesome, because a trophy is different in everybody's book. Everybody looks at an animal with through a different lens of what a trophy is and isn't, and so giving them that opportunity to decide. Yeah. Well,
okay, for what, even though there is a 10-year sit-out period, the draw odds in this are really, they're going to be low.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really fair for us to dictate what someone can and can't take in this situation? And I think, it really isn't fair if we did. So we kept it as open for the hunter as possible.
And I love that it's not so complicated. A lot of these states make it really complicated. You have to have a split, or a brow tine, or it has to, has to be something on one side and something not on the other kind of a thing. And so that makes it very simple, especially because a lot of these hunters, it may be the first time they're hunting elk, and so it keeps it very simple for them that, yeah, if you're over that 6-inch mark, you're good to go kind of a thing.
Yeah, and it's like this regulation, when we get to more management, this regulation may change. It may not, but right now there's just no reason for us to add complexity when it's just not necessary.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely agree. Well, we've kind of touched on a lot of things here, and I guess I'll get you out of here on this kind of last question, and that is, like I said, we've kind of touched on what the future of elk hunting in Missouri, what we're hoping it's going to look like. But from a scientific view, from a biologist's view, what do you think the future is going to hold for elk hunting in Missouri? Is that herd going to get big enough that you will get to that point of a management style of tags and things like that? Do you feel like the herd will get big enough that there may be some of those non-resident opportunities? What does it look like to you?
Yeah, I think the future of elk hunting in Missouri looks pretty exciting, honestly, and I don't think I'm just biased. I think it really is. We look at, we'll go back in time just a touch again. We go to June 1st of 2014. We estimated we had, of the 108 individuals that we reintroduced, 81 of them were still alive. So, for argument's sake, say that we had a founding population on June 1st of 2014 of 81 elk. We're now sitting at, we estimate 207 before calving season this year. So as of June 1st of this year, we estimate that we'll have 207. The number gain there isn't large. The percent gain is incredibly large. That population's more than double. We're, based on our current models, we're estimating and hoping to have somewhere around 400 elk by 2025.
Wow.
That is a very sharp growth curve. We're realistically going to get, if that trend doesn't, or if our estimates turn out to be reality, we're going to get to the management side of elk here probably in the next 2 or 3 years. We'll start looking more at actual management versus just recreational opportunity. And so again, if things continue, we will see an increase in tags, and that will provide differing opportunity. We'll see an increase in antlered tags. We'll also see the beginning of opportunity to harvest cows or antlerless elk as well. And so that'll provide more permits and a different hunt that may also spread out some of the competition between those two different permits, especially, likely be less interest in the cow, but that should then increase the draw odds for those cow permits, or improve the draw odds for those cow permits. As far as, with that population gain, again, we know that elk need space. And so one of the things that we'll do is we will work with the stakeholders here in the state, private landowners, some of the different agencies, and really assess what the thoughts and feelings and opinions are of those stakeholders regarding where elk are within the Ozarks in Missouri. We are never going to have elk across the state of Missouri. Missouri is just not. There are lots of parts of the state where elk would cause far more problems and be viewed as a very negative thing compared to where they are. So elk are likely always going to be in this relatively small geographical area, but the public is going to tell us, and the private landowners are going to tell us where within that geography elk are welcome and where they're not. And so we'll work to manage elk around those desires of those stakeholders. What that'll mean for non-resident permits, I honestly don't know. That'll be another one of those where, we will seek the input of Missourians. We'll also probably seek that anytime we offer public input, that's open to anyone in the world, not just Missourians. And so, non-residents are welcome to chime in with with their comments on elk hunting in Missouri. But we are likely to put Missourians first for certainly the next few years. Again, we'll reassess that as time goes, but Missourians right now are first.
Well, as you should. So my only thought was on this non-residents. If ever gets to that point, let's just keep the tag prices the same. $50 for a non-resident tag.
Okay, what are you trying to do to me? That's not going to work.
Man, I thought I had you there. Dang it. Oh gosh. Well, cool, Aaron. Go ahead.
You're telling some of my, the regional director with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for Kansas and Missouri, Jordan Brown. He likes to give me a lot of hard times on some of these things as well. So
good on him. Oh goodness. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for jumping on with me today. This was a lot of information. I'm so sorry to bombard you with kind of question after question. But like I said, when we first released that article, we had a lot of interest come in on it, and a lot mainly from Missouri. They just had a lot of questions about it and want to make sure that they're ready because the season's not that far away. I mean, you guys are starting it up this year, and so everybody kind of just wanted to know the details behind it. There's been interest outside, in non-residents as well. Just as hunters, we look for opportunities, not even just for ourselves, but for other hunters. And when a new opportunity comes up, it's just so cool, and we appreciate it so much. So we appreciate what Missouri is doing right now. The conservation department, everything that you guys are doing there, just appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for just creating more opportunity for hunters. So. Well, Aaron, I will let you back to your day. Again, appreciate your time. Hopefully this isn't the last time we talk. Hopefully we get to chat more in the future.
Sounds good. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to, tell your viewers or listeners a little bit more about elk in Missouri and the hunting opportunity we have. So
cool. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate you again.
All right. Thank you. You have a good day.
You too. Talk to you later. All right, guys. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. Really quickly before I let you guys go, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well as our other platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've got a lot of good content coming out, so go check those out and get subscribed. Thanks, guys.